I was 22 years old, a woman with a college degree. That's nothing too exceptional to say here in the United States. In Afghanistan, my homeland, women like me were the exception. It had been a little over a decade since the fall of the Taliban regime, a time when it was quite literally illegal for girls to go to school. The Afghan people had spent that decade rebuilding our nation and our lives. And when I stood on that TED Woman stage, I challenged the world to dare to educate Afghan girls. The way I had just started doing at a place in Kabul called the School of Leadership Afghanistan, or SOLA. To me, Afghanistan is a country of hope and boundless possibilities. And every single day, the girls of SOLA remind me of that.
where did this idea of evolution come from? Well, there are always ideas. You can go back to Aristotle and find elements of evolutionary thought in Aristotle. But really, it's a 19th century idea. And in order to see how it developed, let's go back to about 1790 or 1800. So at the end of the century of the Enlightenment. At that point, if you were to ask a well-educated person living in a Western culture how old the world is, they would say, oh, thousands of years. And if you were to ask them, well, where did all these species on the planet come from? They would say they were all created just the way they look now, and they've never changed. And if you ask them, have there ever been any species that went extinct? They would say no. Everything that was created is still alive and can be found somewhere on the planet. So when Alexander von Humboldt, who was certainly a creature of the Enlightenment, sets out to explore South America, he thinks that he might encounter some of those strange fossils that the French have been turning up in the Paris Basin on top of a tepue in Venezuela. So he really thought that there was a lost world. Of course, Arthur Conan Doyle later wrote a novel about that. But I mean, these guys actually thought, hey, I go to Venezuela or I go to the Congo, I might meet a brontosaurus.
I have a problem with my political science class. Literally, I know nothing about it and regret taking it. I should have dropped the class.
Calm down, Jane. Students take classes to learn.
I know, but I am so clueless. I am just not so into the politics, constitution, and laws. And again, the words are so confusing to me.
Jane, let me tell you something. Based on my experience, you just need to try. You know, the words may sound difficult, but they are not at all that difficult. Once you get familiar with the vocabulary, basic laws, and events, political science is a very interesting and easy subject. On top of that, you have me to help you.
Do you really think so?
Yes, I'm sure. Everything's up to you. If you think positively and put effort into it, everything will become easy.
Poultry and all minced, rolled, stuffed, tenderized, and similar types of meat, including burgers, need to be cooked right through. This difference relates to where microorganisms are found on the meat. We know microorganisms live on the surface of raw meat because animals naturally harbor microorganisms. That's why just cooking the surface of a whole piece of muscle meat is sufficient, excluding poultry, because that would kill any potentially
Now we're pretty good at knowing just how bad a flood will be, and we're pretty good at knowing when they're going to happen. We've been looking to solve flooding since our earliest civilizations. Since Noah, we've been looking for a flood workaround. So why is this still such a huge problem? Because we love water. We need it. We always have to have it. We build our cities next to oceans and rivers because being next to this critical resource makes our lives easier. Today, in fact, most of the world lives in coastal areas. And more of the world lives in urban zones. Students and entrepreneurs seeking bright futures are drawn to exciting opportunities in cities. In 2008, for the first time, half the world's population was urban. By the time my little girls are my age, more than 70% of the world's population will be urban. That's a rapid growth.
"15 years ago, I was bitten by a king cobra while rescuing it from a house which otherwise would have been killed. There is no anti-venom for Indian king cobra, so I was certain I would die in about 30 minutes. The bite was in my hand. The pain was moving up my arm towards the heart. The pain was so excruciating that I actually begged the team to just let me die rather than stay in agony. I remembered I had stocked a few vials of antivenom from Thailand meant for Thailand king cobra, which I decided to experiment with it on myself. But the Thai antivenom failed, and we had to stop the treatment. But here I am, a ghost. No, the king was kind. He'd injected a very small quantity of venom into my hand, which wasn't enough to kill me. My mother hoped that this near-death experience would finally stop my snake obsession, but no. For those 3 painful days at the hospital, all I wondered was if the king cobra was one species, as science believed, then why didn't the Thailand antivenom work on me? It became apparent that we were missing something.
The story of the Great Baltimore Fire of 1904 is important for a few reasons. To this day, it is one of the largest urban conflagrations in US history. And in today's money, the toll of this one event is upwards of $3 billion. But the Great Fire is remarkable not just for its tolls, but for what happened afterwards. Witnessing the devastation that was caused by a single unattended cigarette prompted massive change in how Baltimore and the rest of the country protect itself against urban fires. We saw changes in 3 major areas. First, we began using data to make buildings safer and to improve the way we respond to fires. Governments passed ordinances that became the basis of the first building codes, standards that inform the design and construction of buildings to make them more resistant to fire and to protect the people that occupy them. We installed fire alarms so that we could detect and pinpoint fires in buildings as soon as they occur and alert people of the need to evacuate. And we created national standards for firefighting equipment so that crews coming out of state could hook up their hoses.
This is real life. It's real. And we flew there with these canvas bladders in our suitcases. We got sunburned because it was Boston winter. And then we filled them with sand and we placed them underwater. These are exactly the same geometries that you saw in the tank. They're just human scale. Large objects filled with sand, we place them underwater. They're just really simple geometries. In the front of them, you'll see it's clear water. The waves are crashing over. It's quite clear. And then on the back side, there's turbulence. The water and the sand is mixing up. It's causing sediment transport, and then the sand is accumulating. You'll see some friendly stingrays here that visited us. On the left is day 1, the right is day 3. You'll see the sand ripples in the light areas where the sand is accumulating just after 2 days. So this was last February, and it's very much ongoing work. This is just in the beginning of this research. Over the next year and longer, we're going to be studying this through satellite imagery and bathymetry data to understand what the short-term and long-term impacts are of natural sand accumulation in the environment. And the bigger vision, though, is that we want to build submersible geometries, almost like submarines that we can sink and float.
Did anyone happen to catch the American Metropolis last night? It was about the growth of cities.
I didn't see that, but I did see part of a documentary last week that told about a guy, I think he was a visitor from another country, who wrote a book about the growth of industry and so on, the things we've just studied. I remember he said there was a huge population explosion that turned America into a nation of cities all within a decade. He was talking mostly about Baltimore.
Baltimore then or now?
In the 19th century, right after the Civil War.
The program you saw was part of the same series as the one I want to tell you about. Last night the topic was New York City. As early as 1880, the federal government wrote a report on how the 5 separate municipalities of New York actually constituted one vast metropolitan area. It was a progressive way of thinking at the time, and within 20 years, those 5 municipalities were officially united as a single city by a vote of the people. To this day, however, each borough maintains traces of its original independence.
I agree with that. I'm from Brooklyn, and it's definitely different from the rest of New York.
When do things go back to how they were?
King cobra was first described scientifically in 1836
By 2021, we had enrolled nearly 100 girls in grades 6 through 11.